Especially if you're of a certain age, there are certain name brands in college football that just fit together. And once they are linked in the same sentence and usually by a hyphen, there is a magic about it. And this is one of those weeks in Southern California. USC, UCLA, what more needs to be said? Regardless, we will say a whole lot in the next 60 minutes, of course, here on USC Live, right here at the Voice of College Football. So you know what the deal is. You ultimately produce the show. Leave your comments and questions there in the live chat. And of course, the guy that makes this all work each and every Monday night for us, Matt Zemek from Trojans Wire. Get on over there to Trojans Wire, especially this week, to check out Matt's work. Matt, how you doing tonight?
Rivalry week, UCLA week, and it is truly a big game. This is the biggest USC-UCLA game since 2005 when UCLA came in with one loss. USC, of course, was unbeaten in the Pete Carroll juggernaut team, trying to go back-to-back in the BCS, trying to win 3 straight national titles if you include the 2003 AP national championship. So a special time. But, of course, you know, those worthless UCLA Bruins, you know, they lose to Arizona to take a little bit of the juice out of this. You know, what do you expect? What do you want from a Bruin? You know, so, you know, if UCLA had beaten Arizona, we would have had both teams at 9-1, both quarterbacks on the same footing in the Heisman race, both teams in the college football playoff mix, both teams, you know, with that's the same amount of leverage in the Pac-12 race. And now, you know, it's a little bit tilted. I guess, you know, if there's one good aspect of UCLA losing from a USC standpoint, it's that USC is now the only, and this is also combined with Oregon losing to Washington, USC is now the only one-loss team in the Pac-12. So that means that USC, if it finishes with 2 losses, whether it's 10-2 or 11-2, USC can lose one more game and probably, not definitely, probably, it'll need a little bit of help in a few other games. It's like it'll need TCU to lose once, for instance. But if USC gets a little bit of help and finishes with precisely 2 losses, it'll probably get the New Year's 6 if, you know, in the event that it doesn't win the Pac-12 championship, because you need to be in the top 12. USC is going to be 6 in the college football playoff rankings, most likely, with all the other teams surrounding USC losing. And so if you split the UCLA and Notre Dame games, and both are going to be resume-enhancing games now that Notre Dame has built itself up, is now, you know, a top 20 win. If USC splits the UCLA-Notre Dame pair and ultimately finishes with 2 losses, USC probably won't drop out of the top 12. So that keeps USC in line for the at-large New Year's 6 bid, which is the Cotton Bowl. I mentioned TCU because a TCU loss knocks the Frogs out of the playoff, and that would put them in the Sugar Bowl, you know, presumably as the Big 12 champion. If TCU makes the playoff, the Big 12 gobbles up another spot in the Sugar Bowl, and that's one less spot for the New Year's 6 pool. So USC to have even better odds of the New Year's 6 needs TCU to lose. The Clemson loss to Notre Dame was really good because it created that same dynamic in the ACC. Clemson not going to be in the playoffs, so the ACC gets only 1 New Year's 6 bid instead of 2. So USC needs that to happen with TCU in the Big 12. And if it does happen, and USC is at least able to get one of these wins over the next 2 weeks, should be able to get the New Year's 6, which, you know, I've said before, like New Year's 6, that was really the baseline goal. If you get more than that, fantastic, but at least a New Year's 6, that would really, really make this first season a success under Lincoln Riley.
Matt, what do you think is more difficult, that USC has arrived after 10 games at 9 wins and 1 loss, or what they have to navigate the next 3 weeks with UCLA, Notre Dame, and a possible Pac-12 championship? It is really a backloaded schedule once you include the possibilities of a Pac-12 championship game.
Well, I think it's definitely these next 3 games, and that's because you know that Travis Dye's not playing, and you know that Eric Gentry might not play. Eric Gentry, you know, has not returned to the lineup since his injury against Utah, and you know Lincoln Riley the week after the Utah game said that, he was relieved that it was not a long-term injury with Eric Gentry. Said the same about Jordan Addison. But if he misses this UCLA game, like, to me, that's a long-term injury. I mean, it's all relative, but like, I certainly thought when I heard Lincoln Riley say it's not a long-term injury. I mean, he was listed as day-to-day for the Arizona game on October 29. So you're thinking, okay, he's going to be there for the UCLA game. But here we are. He did not dress for the Colorado game last Friday. So it's a real concern. Addison's going to be good to go. Raylan Goforth is going to be good to go. He played a little bit against Colorado. Andrew Voorhees is going to be good to go. Those players who have been recently injured, they're going to be fine. They're going to play, and they seem to be close to full strength. They progressed exactly as Lincoln Riley and the staff hoped, but Eric Gentry, not so much. And that is the injury in my mind, which really could matter the most against UCLA. Like, if you ask me, Mark, which injury matters more, Travis Dye or Eric Gentry, obviously both huge injuries, both huge absences if Gentry is not able to play. But I think Gentry's the bigger one. Gentry does so much to knit together this defense, and the backup linebackers, like, we know the cupboard was left thin by Clay Helton. That's not going to cut it against DTR and Zach Charbonnet. You need Eric Gentry there, partly because he knows DTR. Like, he's played against UCLA, knows what that offense is like, knows what that offense can do. Great student of the game, in addition to his natural athletic skill set and his football IQ. He really patched together so many holes for the USC defense. Through 6 weeks, he was the defensive MVP of this team. Obviously, Tuli Tuipulotu, just all these sacks. I mean, he's become the full season MVP. But I think USC really needs to get something out of Gentry. Maybe not a full 60-minute performance, but like, hey, can he play 20 snaps and be valuable to a certain extent? I think that's a bigger cause for concern than Travis Dye, because Austin Jones is a really good runner. The main deficit when you're comparing Austin Jones and Travis Dye is Austin Jones does not provide nearly the quality of pass protection that Travis Dye did. Travis Dye did everything. It wasn't that Austin Jones couldn't run. It's that Austin Jones didn't do all the other things. And Lincoln Riley, he's made this clear. He will play you if you can do all the different things that go into being a football player. The blocking, working within the scheme, making the right reads, not just what you do when you have the ball. Travis Dye did all those things. That's why he got so many reps, and Austin Jones didn't get many. So it's not really comparing them as running backs. It's comparing them in all the other situations. I will say that Austin Jones, because he hasn't gotten many reps, he's fresh. So that could actually, minimize the severity of the Travis Dye injury. If you're going to feed Austin Jones a lot in this game, I'm not necessarily saying USC should, but Lincoln Riley could do that, and you're not going to work him into the ground in terms of like you're pushing him too far. No, Austin Jones can definitely handle a heavy workload in this game if he's asked to do so. So for these and other reasons, I think Gentry is really the bigger injury and the guy that USC needs more. I really think the Trojans need to see him on the field. Of course, USC could score 56 and render Eric Gentry's absence moot if Gentry is not able to play. And I think that goes back to how USC plays this game. I think USC has to play this game to score as many points as possible. I don't think that controlling the ball should be the emphasis. It's score as much as you possibly can. And you don't let the foot off the gas. So we've seen USC with 14, 15, 20-point leads, and then the Trojans relax. Like, this is the game of all games where a 14-point lead in the second or early third quarter, it might as well be a tie. You just need to be the road runner, beep, beep, and you just speed away from Wile E. Coyote and Chip Kelly, and you just don't look back. That's how USC needs to play this game. USC needs to be a Lamborghini here. Just roar and floor it and go higher and push harder, and you just try to run away from those Bruins and their sorry defense.
Yeah, it's even more unfortunate when Travis Dye goes down in a game that he obviously wasn't needed. 21 catches on the season, 9 touchdowns, 6.1 yards per carry. And Austin Jones, even better at 6.4 with just the 52 rushing attempts, as Matt outlined. Not seldom used, but obviously pretty fresh. Raleek Brown, the talented 5-star running back, we saw him a little bit against Colorado, and we've seen him in spurts, 31 carries and a touchdown this season. It seems to be very quickly now a much thinner running back room. It was never a crowded running back room or a deep running back room.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to see Austin Jones and you're going to see Raleek Brown. Maybe you see Barlow a little bit, but like you're not going to give too many carries to a third or fourth running back in this game. It's mostly going to be about 2 guys. And you talked about Raleek Brown. I think this is going to be really interesting to see how Lincoln Riley deploys Raleek Brown in this game. Do you use him as a ball carrier, and do you mix and match what he and Austin Jones do as setbacks, as taking handoffs or pitches? I think this is a game where you can get Raleek Brown in open space as a receiver, and I think that Raleek Brown, he's not mature enough yet as a runner. Where you're going to give him a lot of the carries, because Austin Jones is a mature runner in terms of just going north and south, maximizing what he can do, getting through the hole, a lot like Travis Dye. But like Travis Dye was a really patient runner, like, in terms of waiting for the holes to develop, like kind of like Christian McCaffrey and other really elite running backs. Austin Jones is not there, but like Raleek Brown, he's nowhere close to having that kind of patience and maturity as a complete running back, not just in terms of raw speed and athletic ability, but understanding of the game. So I think getting him out in open space where he can blow by, where he can run by people on pass routes, and you design plays designed for him to run in open space, beat a defender. I think that might be the way for Lincoln Riley to maximize Raleek Brown, especially, you now have Jordan Addison coming back for sure. Don't know about Mario Williams, but just assume that Jordan Addison's going to play. He's going to play. You might use him as a decoy, and you might use a combination route in which he draws the attention of the defense, but you get Raleek Brown leaking behind in a particular combination. So like Jordan Addison is the eye candy to draw the safety over the top, and then you can maybe sneak Raleek Brown up the sideline without the safety help. Maybe Lincoln Riley is envisioning how to draw up plays to help Raleek Brown maximize his value with Travis Dye out. Maybe that's the extra piece USC needs on offense.
It is only fitting on this week in particular that I welcome our next media member in the fashion that I do each and every year, by expressing and letting everyone know that, as for me, this is almost a fact, that this game is aesthetically the most beautiful game in college football, especially played in the Rose Bowl on that field with the majestic San Gabriel's behind, the clash of those 2 uniforms with the garnet and gold and the powder blue. It's just majestic. It's beautiful. And it is USC, UCLA. And one of my favorite media members, of course, joining us here, Tony Siracusa from Last Word on College Football. I was just pumped up for this night to talk to Matt and Tony to talk to you as well.
Hey, Mark, how you doing, Matt? Good to see you as always. And yeah, when you paint the picture like that, Mark, I mean, making me a little homesick as I sit out here in Charlotte where it's about 40 degrees tonight. But I will say this, look, Mark, you and I go way back. We go back a lot of years. We've been working together on various projects. I do the whole objective reporter thing, especially when I was, at UCLA multiple times a week. I do the whole objective reporter thing, but it's rivalry week. It is all that. I had to put on the colors tonight. Had to do it for this show. As a matter of fact, you went the wrong way there. I don't know if you can see it, but behind me is there it is. The Cade McNown autograph little mini helmet back there, the memorabilia case with a lot of UCLA stuff and Angels baseball stuff, but we'll skip that.
Well, this is the portion of the show, and these type of shows, when I get the likes of you two together, where
Mhm.
I just basically play graphics guy and I just get out of the way and let you two go at it, because I'm looking forward to this one. But I will start us out in this fashion, Matt, before you and Tony can take it away. Um, Favorite moments, historic moments that come to mind off the top of your head? And I know that you could go on for the next 5 hours, Tony, but what are at the very top of the list?
Well, let's just educate our younger fans here at the Voice of College Football. The most important USC UCLA game ever played. We can debate what the best game is, or the most fun, the most wild finish, whatever. But the most important USC UCLA game was 1967. You had Gary Beeben, the Heisman Trophy contender for the Bruins, the quarterback of the Bruins, and O.J. Simpson, the Heisman contender for USC. It was a matchup of top 4 teams, and the winner goes to the Rose Bowl and has the inside track to the national championship. And you have now USC fans of a younger age remember Reggie Bush and that run against Fresno State in 2005, the run that for many people sealed his Heisman Trophy. That run carved out a path, a flight path, which was similar to O.J. Simpson's epic run in that 1967 USC-UCLA game, one of the iconic runs in college football history, and certainly the most famous run in USC history. So when we talk about great USC-UCLA moments, I mean, I know that USC won that game, but really, just objectively, there has never been a more important game in terms of all the stakes, all the hype. Two teams at the top of the mountain in this rivalry, 1967 has to be numero uno.
Yeah, no coincidence that Matt picks one that USC won. But in all seriousness, I would agree, because from a national landscape, both teams were right there at the top. It wasn't, one holding the other back from advancing on to the postseason or whatever the case may be. That was both teams at the top of the college football landscape. And, obviously the people who are invested in the USC UCLA rivalry, they know what this is. But for anyone else outside of that, this is two schools that are 12 miles apart. That's it. And they're recruiting the same players. And you got guys who went to the same high school together that are now on opposite sides. And, the venom that goes with it. And, you got to live with it the rest of the year with whatever happens. You got to go to your place of work and deal with the other Bruins or the other Trojans. And it's you live it in this town all year round. And, so it really is that big. Look, I'm older than both of you. And so, I go back to my first college football games being in 1972 when I was about 7 years old. So I go back to the days also when USC dominated the rivalry. Both teams played at the Coliseum. The seats were split in half, one side USC, one side UCLA. You had John McKay, patrolling the sidelines. The USC offensive lines were so dominant back then. I mean, you're talking about, Brad Buddy and Anthony Munoz and guys like that were so dominant. And UCLA was still the gutty little Bruins, a nickname they have grown to appropriately despise over the years. The Terry Donahue days, and even before then, the Dick Vermeil days, and even before then, Tommy Prothro and Pepper Rogers and guys like that. So I went through all of those, Georgia Chica blocking a last second field goal at the Coliseum. I think it was probably Norm Johnson kicking it for UCLA.
81.
Would have won the game. Yeah,
81.
there you go. UCLA USC for the first time in the Rose Bowl when it became UCLA's home stadium, and Carl Morgan getting that sack at the end of the game that saved it for UCLA. And the Tommy Maddox shootouts with Marinovich. I mean, there's just so much stuff. If you're a UCLA fan, you're still to this day, 40 years later, 35 years later, still waiting for Eric Aftholder to come down with possession in the end zone, on that catch. He's still bobbling it decades later. There's so much here. And like I said, with it being so intense all year round and these guys at each other all year round, it really is something. I've got to tell you, there's a lot of talk because now that I live in North Carolina and it's basketball country, even though, UNC's having a great football season and all that, it's still ACC basketball, right? But last week I drove from Charlotte to Raleigh for the Wake Forest at North Carolina State game. And as you're going along that same highway, you pass by Wake Forest and then you keep going and you get to Chapel Hill and you get to Durham. And there's all that talk of that UNC Duke rivalry for basketball. It's really not a big deal for football. And you see that how close they are. It's not as close as it seems, and it's not as close as USC and UCLA, and from a geographic standpoint. So there's just so much to this, and I agree with you, Mark. The aesthetics of it on TV have always, and even in person, with both of them wearing the home uniforms, it's just phenomenal.
I will say it's a war crime to not have this game at 3:30 Eastern, 12:30 Pacific. You need to have this game in sunshine. But of course, hashtag Larry Scott, hashtag Pac-12 media deal,
right?
Not being able to get time slot preference on
hashtag.
Our friends at
Big Ten.
Our friends at Utah and Oregon, they get that elite game late at night. What an absolute crock.
Yeah. And hashtag Big Ten.
Hashtag pack our bags.
That's right.
Well, Tony, Matt was certainly taking a shot before you jumped on that, of course, UCLA was the one to take a little luster off of this one with
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah, against the Arizona Wildcats. But still, Matt was also letting us know that this is not, prohibited the UCLA players from pounding their chests a little bit and saying, hey, we're coming after them and we can hang another 62 plus on USC this year.
Yeah, look, I mean, I hate to say it, but how typical of UCLA to lose a game to a, completely undermanned Arizona squad who shouldn't have belonged on the field with UCLA that night. And, UCLA puts up one of their lows of the season in terms of points scored. It was for decades, a kind of a typical UCLA thing to do going into the biggest game. What were they looking ahead? No one's ever going to admit anything like that. So it did. It took a little luster off of it. The entire Pac-12 is just in such a strange predicament, of course, with the no divisional play, and you've got the top two teams that are going to go, because you've got a USC who's at 7-1 in the conference, and Oregon's there at 6-1, and Utah at 6, and UCLA down at 5-2. USC is carrying the hopes of whatever Pac-12 playoff aspirations still exist. Needs to win out. And by Pac-12 rules, a three-loss school is not eligible for the Pac-12 championship game, which could be kind of weird depending upon what happens this weekend with some of these games. So it's great because this is the way it should have been without the divisions. It should have been just you take your best, you let everybody play through that 12 weeks. You take the top two and let them hammer it out on the field like that. And so it is terrific. You're right, Mark. There is the chest thumping, which, there should be for this game. That's okay. I don't like it most of the year, but I like it for this game because it tells you that that's what this game is all about. And everybody knows it. And, I think Dorian Thompson-Robinson saying earlier today that, we really hate those guys. And, DTR claiming that SC players were cussing at them a couple of years ago as USC won at the Rose Bowl. And, this is the kind of game where you don't even know if half of these stories are true, but they're there and they go off legend. And You got, UCLA players from 15, 20 years ago talking about something that happened in their game and you don't even know if it's true. But over time being as much as 30 days, then the story just builds and these things happen. And you've got both statues on campus covered up now, all week, the Tommy Trojan statue and the Bruin Bear, and, people guarding the statue 24/7 and things like that. And you start to hear some legendary stories, and they of course grow in stature over time, but that's what makes it fun.
In talking about DTR, let's just unpack this. He said like he expects to score over 60 points and do better than last year, which was 62. And hey, if I'm looking at Alex Grinch's USC defense and I'm looking at Eric Gentry perhaps not playing, I'm not. Am I going to blame DTR for mouthing off like that? Not really.
Probably not.
This goes back to your point. Like you do this after you scored just 28 against an Arizona defense, which had given up 45 or more in 5 of its previous 6 games, including 49 points to Cal. You scored just 28 against that defense. So, like, it's really just the timing of it. But, of course, timing is kind of relative because it's rivalry week. You don't really have another opportunity to do this. So, I posted this at Trojans Wire because, of course, that story is going to get read. That's the business I'm in. You post what people are going to read, provided it's, reasonably wholesome and not totally off the rails.
Right. There's enough of that out there.
I don't blame DTR for that. What's really interesting is UCLA safety Mo Osling saying, quote, "We know we're going to replicate," unquote, last year. Oh, now come on. You're part of a bad defense, and you just got roasted by Jaden DeLaura. Like, DTR has the right to talk, right? He's a Heisman candidate. I mean, his Heisman candidacy took on a lot of water. Like, he was in the mix. He was in the mix. I mean, he's an elite player. He has a pro future. If you're Mo Osling, what are you doing mouthing off? Like, we can divide here. I don't have a problem with DTR thumping his chest to UCLA, but Mo Osling, who are you? Do you matter? Like, this is Don Draper, in the elevator in Mad Men. Oh, I don't really think about you at all. That's Mo Osling. What are you doing running your mouth? And so hopefully USC is going to, notice these things and bring the fire.
Here's the thing. I don't believe, especially in a game like this, I don't believe in bulletin board material, because if you need bulletin board material to get pumped up for this game, you're really playing the wrong sport and should reconsider your future. That having been said, is UCLA going to put up 62 plus on USC? Probably not. I'm going to say probably not. But look, both defenses are terrible. They just are. It's UCLA's defense is improved, but as I say to my staff a lot, you can't fall off the floor. So, which is where UCLA's defense has been most of the last 4 years under Jerry Azzinaro. So they go out and they get Bill McGovern, and I got to be honest with you. I mean, I've seen every UCLA game a couple of times, at this point. Why? Because I've got, 17, 18 games a week I put on the DVR on top of all the stuff I watch live and the games I cover live. And Bill McGovern's defense is Azzinaro light. It's a little less filling than Azzinaro, but, all the badness that goes with it. I mean, they're 69th in the country in total defense, and they're giving up 376, 77 yards per game. The offense basically has been covering over all of the badness from the defense by just outscoring everybody. So Mo Osling is probably
leads the team in tackles.
Well, again, a
Kind of the
broken
same way
clock.
Bryson Shaw's been getting a lot of tackles for USC because
Yeah, a broken
linebackers aren't
clock is
making the
right twice
tackles.
a day. So, whatever with his comments. The only thing, if you're going to look at what DTR said, at least he's looking at it and saying, well, our defense may not be all that, but SC's is 87th in the country. So, they're giving up another 30, 40 yards a game over what we are. And so I'm going to lick my chops. Here's the thing with DTR, and in all seriousness and in all honesty, here's the thing with his game is UCLA is getting the DTR they've been hoping for years. And that is this. Caleb Williams has better stats. He's got better yardage. He's controlling the offense a little bit more. He's got more touchdowns. I think his touchdown to interception ratio is better. What UCLA is getting from DTR is the mistake-free football. The game is coming to him in a natural rhythm instead of him trying to force the rhythm. He's got 4 interceptions this year. That's okay, really, honestly. You'd like him to have a little bit fewer, but he's throwing it at 72% completion rate. Again, not the same amount of attempts, not the same amount of yards, because they got a dude in the backfield named Zach Charbonnet. So they don't need DTR to air it out, all game, every game. But they're getting the DTR who's just letting the game come to him and attacking the game in a natural rhythm and not forcing things. And that's the Dorian Thompson-Robinson UCLA fans have been waiting years to see.
And this brings up a very ironic point, Tony.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about how DTR has been so much more patient within the UCLA offense this year. UCLA was not patient at the end of that game.
Right.
You're at the Arizona 29 with 22 seconds left. Right. That means you have at least 4 plays. If you get a first down, you might even be able to squeeze 5 plays out of those 22 seconds. You should be throwing a 15-yard pass on that play from the 29 to get inside the 15-yard line, and then you take the 3 shots at the end zone. But Chip Kelly and DTR, who have been around the block, who know better, who should know better, 4 chuck and pray lobs from the 29, and that was not the patient UCLA offense that we've seen this year.
Agreed. And it's easy to take shots at Chip Kelly. He's lent himself to it over the last 5 years, nearly 5 years. That is on him because A, he's calling the plays. Now, B, at this point, DTR's got a chance to check off, the line of scrimmage, but he doesn't have the complete freedom that other quarterbacks do within their offense. And I'm talking about quarterbacks around the country that we see that are doing great. He can make changes within limitations. It is Chip Kelly's offense, and that play calling is on him. And at this point, and you bring up a good point, these two have been around the block together.
Yes,
since the entire Chip Kelly era at UCLA. He should know his quarterback and the offensive rhythm. I keep using that word, but that's what you see when UCLA is clicking correctly in their offense. That's what he should know where DTR is at that point in the game, how he's feeling, and what's there in front of him. And there really was no good rhyme or rationale for that play calling down there. There really wasn't. It felt desperate.
Sure did. Tony, so as we dive into the particulars of this game, I think one of the central tension points of this game is from both sides, on offense, because the offenses figure to have such a great advantage over the defenses. Do you think there's a meaningful difference in terms of how Lincoln Riley and Chip Kelly are going to play this game on offense? And more particularly, do you think that one of them is going to try to emphasize ball control and keeping the other offense off the field? Or are they both going to emphasize, let's just, score as many points as we possibly can? Do you think they're going to come at it fundamentally the same way or differently? And if so, if it's different, who's going to make the change of pace?
I think it is going to be different out of necessity. For USC, not having Travis Dye in the backfield makes a difference. Again, they haven't had to have a particularly deep running back room. Travis Dye wasn't going to be 1,000-yard rusher, but he was a very capable, very competent ground game. You throw in, Caleb Williams and a high-powered offense, which moves downfield with relative ease. They had what I would call complementary parts of the offense, right? That you used either one situationally. All right. Now without Dye, you're going to see SC air it out even more. You just are. I know, Jordan Addison is expected back. That's a huge difference. SC's got so much talent at receiver that's just a significant difference. And it allows them to open it up more. With UCLA, I'm not going to call it ground control. I'm not going to call it, burning the clock, because this isn't the Big Ten. This isn't Iowa's offense, where you're just hoping for the clock to run out at some point so you can leave. When you've got Zach Charbonnet, and, we've all seen Charbonnet plenty, and the guy does not fall down backwards. He does not get tackled going backwards. He is forward moving, move the chains. He's going to get those yards. He's hit 1,100 yards already on the season, reminding everyone that he's missed 2 games. So he's done that in 8 games. And so I think you've got a little bit more balance with the UCLA offense. And I think that they're going to rely heavily on Charbonnet, as they should, as any appropriate offensive game. Look, if you're going to get into just air it out, if you're going to get into Maddox and Marinovich part 2, you're going to get beat. It's a recipe for disaster. You're not going to outgun Caleb Williams. DTR is having a terrific season, but you look at Caleb Williams' numbers and how he's run the offense. You need more balance if you're UCLA. You're going to rely on the run game. You're going to rely on Charbonnet, as you should. So it's a little bit of I don't want to say really slower pace. It's a different pace. They're still going to move the chains, but they're going to do more of it on the ground than USC will.
And let me follow up on this from the side of the USC offense. Do you think that, in the first quarter, do you think that Lincoln Riley is going to try to just take the top off and go deep and just immediately try to land haymakers, or do you think that one thing we've seen USC do in first quarters is a lot of short passes, get Caleb Williams into a rhythm. You get all different receivers touching the ball so that they get a feel for the game. And with shorter routes, you set up bigger plays and more ambitious routes later in the game. How do you think Lincoln Riley is going to look at this game?
If you talk to any coach, and, certainly you've had the opportunity to speak to many, in your tenure, and I've had the chance to speak to many across the country. Any coach will tell you on that first drive, you need a couple of first downs. You don't, the worst thing to do is get the ball on your first possession and go 3 and out. It just creates a cycle. You need a couple of first downs. I expect him to have some short passes, even use, running backs out of the backfield, little wheel routes to move the chains a couple of times. And I say a couple of times because once he's done that, then I expect him to start throwing the haymakers. Once he's got a couple of first downs, depending upon the field position that USC is starting with in their first possession, you move the chains a couple of times, and then I expect him to start going downfield and daring UCLA to try and stop him. You do it until you do it until they've proven they can defend it. And that doesn't mean, Williams misses 1 or 2, and so you dial it back. No, you let him go until UCLA has proven that their defensive backs can stop it, consistently, because UCLA hasn't proven that with many top-end quarterbacks this year. They haven't faced a lot of top-end quarterbacks, but Bo Nix certainly had a good game against them. And so I think you kind of use that as a model. Oregon doesn't rely on its running game that much because Bo Nix is having the best season of his career. You let Bo Nix go. You kind of use that as your model going forward.
All right, let's talk about the tactics from Chip Kelly's side.
Mhm.
Now, you know as well as I do, and everyone watching here on the Voice of College Football, that when USC lost its one game of the season to Utah, the guy it
Mhm.
didn't have an answer for was Dalton Kincaid. 16
Right.
targets, 16 catches for 749 million yards. Unofficial hashtag unofficial statistics. So like Jake Bobo,
Mhm.
strikes me as, like that's the guy that, USC is going to have a hard time covering. But here's the other piece. Part of what made Kincaid so effective for Utah against USC was that Alex Grinch was continuously playing for the run. He was continuously
Mhm.
convinced because Kyle Whittingham and Andy Ludwig usually rely on the run game. He kept guys close to the line of scrimmage, never really made the adjustment to the patterns that Dalton Kincaid was running. USC never really played the pass. It was just never really got around to shifting its defense in terms of what it was going to prepare for. So Cam Rising throws for over 400 yards. So you lay out the very realistic scenario that UCLA is going to lean on Charbonnet as the
Mhm.
number one
Mhm.
line of attack in this game. So is there a non-Jake Bobo pass catcher who, if Alex Grinch is playing the run, trying to take away Charbonnet, is there someone other than Bobo who you think, in terms of the stylings of this matchup, can really be a huge playmaker for the Bruins?
I'm gonna alter your question with my answer a little
You can
bit
alter
by
my questions however you want.
by taking away the term huge and changing it to effective or impactful. Because no, the answer is there another one who's huge? No, there isn't. Are there other options that can be impactful? Yeah, you can get Michael Ezeki, the tight end. You can get Cam Brown, who has been underused much of the year, the second year transfer from A&M. You can use a Logan Loya, and you can use Charbonnet out of the backfield, because in order to be effective against what you see from USC's defense is you've got to spread them wide. All right. You can't just keep running Charbonnet up the middle. There's going to have to be some trap plays. There's going to have to be some players in motion, but you're going to also have to use Charbonnet out of the backfield. You can see, some wheel routes and things like that out of the backfield, or even just throwing to him in the flat and let him pick up a head of steam. He's most dangerous when he has his head of steam. He's harder to bring down. But you can use a Cam Brown to kind of make USC play honest defense, if you will, so that, there's never a chance they're going to double team, Bobo on the outside. Then what you see later on is Bobo's effectiveness, because you forced USC to spread a little bit more. And so, yeah, there are guys like that. Logan Loya is not going to, outrace anybody, but he's an effective pass catcher with good hands. Brown's got terrific speed. Bobo is the go-to guy for a reason. He's got the size. He's got the athleticism. He's got the hands. He wins a lot of those 50-50 balls, where he's got to use his body to fend off a defender and go get it. But I can see him, having maybe 2-3 catches total in the first quarter, because they're utilizing other guys and trying to spread USC out before they really start hitting Bobo.
How do you think UCLA's mentality, how would you size it up given the loss to Arizona?
Mhm.
Like, do you think that this kind of is going to redouble UCLA's focus, or does it lead to a crisis of confidence? And, you know better than I do, in the Jim Mora era, when one bad loss would occur, it wouldn't galvanize the team for the next game.
Right.
It would have the opposite effect of causing, a crumble effect.
Yeah.
So Chip Kelly now, Chip Kelly hasn't had a really, really good team such as this one.
Right.
In a certain sense, it's new territory for him. But of course,
Right.
he's had the preceding few years as examples of, USC or UCLA when it, runs into adversity, doesn't make the great response. Do you think that this team, though, is built different, and it's going to use that loss last week as a time to marshal its forces and really put together its best performance of the season?
Here's where I think this thing is this week after the loss for UCLA. You're right. Jim Moore's loss has turned into snowballs rolling downhill and getting bigger and worse. It's ironic now that he's going to a bowl game, having rebuilt UConn. I'm happy for him. I like Jim, and I always did. He's, good guy. As long as he wasn't pissed off at you, he was a good guy. But watching what he's done at UConn is shocking. But with regards to Chip, I think here's the thing: we haven't seen this before. Yep. We haven't seen it because last year there was, for lack of a better phrase, there was balance throughout the season. They finished 8-4. They didn't have their season come down because of a particular loss, one particular game. They beat LSU and then they lost the next week. They lost to Fresno State, which, should be unimaginable, but isn't these days at UCLA. How did they rebound? But this is different because there was so much riding on it. Really a shot at the college football playoff conversation. I'm not sure they would have gotten in, even if they had run the table, but they would have been in the conversation at least. But the difference in this year's team is the maturity, because it's already a very experienced team, even, with grad transfers that UCLA has, the players who have been there for all or most or, part of the Chip Kelly era. There's a maturity on this team that hasn't existed before. They would say things that they thought they were supposed to say, but really they didn't even believe. I bring this up, jokingly, and, we would get the press conferences. You would have the post-game press conference, but then Monday you would get players via Zoom for their interviews. And you would hear even DTR say stuff that provably wasn't true, but it was what he had convinced himself of. You don't hear that anymore. You don't hear those things anymore. You hear definitiveness without cockiness. You hear confidence without conceit, up until this week and talking about putting up 62. But for most of the season, you hear confidence without conceit. You hear a belief. And so I really, while there was a lot that was undone, this is also the first UCLA team in a long time that has a shot to play for the conference championship, that has a shot to play for a spot in the Rose Bowl. I don't think the Arizona loss deflates them to a point of irretrievability.
To stay on that same wavelength, bringing up what happened last year, Tony, you and I had this conversation a number of times during the off season, that a number of national folks that I talked to that aren't close to the situation didn't really analyze the UCLA situation last year and the results, thought, okay, Chip Kelly's taking a major step here and going 8-4. Well, they beat the lousy teams they were supposed to beat. They lost to everybody with a pulse, good teams. You weren't impressed. You didn't feel as though that was necessarily a step in the right direction. This season, where do you stand on this season?
It's to be determined. I don't think we know yet, to be quite honest. I'm not ready to characterize this season. The 8-4 year last year was really the bottom line of where they should have been. They didn't beat anybody with a winning record that finished the season with a winning record. It felt great to beat, a blue blood like LSU. And then we saw where LSU's season went, and you're like, yeah, okay. Turns out LSU wasn't that good, and the coach got fired.
And I was really looking forward to the Holiday Bowl. That was a good matchup.
Yeah. Hey, I was down there ready, and my phone, as soon as Martin Jarman told the crowd at one of the booster breakfasts, the day of the game, my phone starts cranking like crazy. And yeah, it was predictable that it would be canceled. And, without delving too deep into that, there's an interesting, because I do want to get back to Mark's question, but there's an interesting side story in that even as UCLA was winning, They didn't think they were going to get the fans, we'll call them the social media fans. They're different than the people who don't engage and they just go watch the games. They were convinced the playoff committee would never give them a shot anyway, because the chairman of the playoff committee is Boo Corrigan, the athletic director at North Carolina State. I had to tell people, look, Boo Corrigan doesn't care, because guess what? North Carolina State got their payout from the Holiday Bowl, and the ACC got their payout. UCLA didn't, because of the way this went down. So Boo Corrigan was like, hey, we pulled in a few million without having to do anything. Thanks. Appreciate it. He was not going to hold UCLA back. Back to the point of this season. Look, 9 wins was, I think you and I talked before the season started, Mark, and I said 9 wins is the bare minimum. It has to be, because you're going to go 3-0 and out of conference, because it's one of the weakest out of conference schedules in the country. And yes, I know why. I know about the Michigan buyout and all those things. Fine, whatever. You had a chance to replace one of the other teams 2 years ago when you knew about the Michigan buyout, but that's a whole other topic. You're going to get 3 wins there. You have to win 5 to 6 out of the Pac-12 schedule. And so I was looking at, 9 is the bare minimum, 10 is good, and then, everything over that is gravy. So I don't think we know yet what it is. Look, I think that, and believe it or not, I think depending upon what happens Saturday at the Rose Bowl, the Cal game is a potential danger game. If USC beats UCLA and they've lost 2 in a row, man, as bad as Cal's offense is, and who knows what it'll look like now if they fired the offensive coordinator, you can look at Cal coming in and, doing some crazy, dangerous stuff to UCLA.
Like it did to USC.
Right, exactly. So I don't think we know. I think we really need to play this out over the next 2 weeks. And then do they get to the conference championship game, and how competitive are they if they're facing Oregon again? Things like that. I think it's still to be determined. 8 wins is, it's fine. You were supposed to get there. Even 9 wins, you were supposed to get there.
Let me cut in real briefly before you make your point. I'm going to respond to this viewer. Mark never believed in USC. It's documented on YouTube. Again, my USC prediction was 9-3, 7-2, and a first place tie in the Pac-12. Whatever you want to take that as, not believing in USC or whatever, however you want to take it. Our guy D, he shows up every week to let me know that I was way off on USC.
You know what? You know what you are, Mark? You are the network announcers for every college football game ever, because no matter who is broadcasting a game, you can go on both teams' fan pages and they'll tell you, oh, these announcers hate us. They're biased. You could tell. You will go to the USC and UCLA, fan pages on Saturday, and they'll talk about, oh, this. They'll blame Gus Johnson. I mean, how do you blame Gus? They'll say Gus Johnson always hated USC. And then you go to the UCLA ones, he's never liked UCLA. That's what you are. No matter what you say, Mark, the other team is going to say, you never liked us. You never believed in us.
A couple months ago on Twitter, I actually took a screenshot of comments on a post where back-to-back comments, one blamed me for being a homer on one side and another, they were right next to each other on the same video.
I totally believe it. And I believe it probably happens to you quite a bit. It's like, you look at when I was at the Wake Forest, North Carolina game last week, both sides were like, oh, the refs are jobbing us, both fan bases. And it's like, well, they can't be jobbing both of you, and if they are, then it's neutral and it really doesn't matter much. Every fan base thinks the refs are, the worst ever in that particular game, and trying to screw over that school.
I don't have a question for you, Tony, right now. I just want to kind of piggyback on what you said about UCLA's season and kind of the verdict, the larger assessment being still to be determined. I think USC is in the exact same position.
Yeah, I agree.
USC does not have that high end win. And like Penn State is another example. Penn State is in line to be 10-2, with the 2 losses being in the 2 most important games. Like that is a season that I see a lot of. There's always at least 2 or 3 of those kinds of seasons where a team is 10-2, but the 2 losses were the 2 most important games. So USC needs to at least win one of these next 2 games. If USC loses each of these next 2 games, this season is a failure. And that might seem harsh for year 1 under Lincoln Riley, but hey, you've gotten this far, but you're playing in what has been a top heavy Pac-12 with a very mushy, gooey middle. The Pac-12 is not as deep as it was.
Mushy, gooey.
Like you need to walk away from this season with at least one high-end win. And I can, UCLA is a better win than Notre Dame if we're going to compare, but you at least get one of these 2, at least get to 10-2. And as I was remarking earlier to Mark at the very top of the show here on the Voice of College Football, if USC does get 10-2, the odds are increasing that will be a Cotton Bowl resume, because you're seeing the teams underneath USC lose. And so USC's odds of finishing in the top 12 with a 10-2 record, with a split of these next 2 games, USC's odds of finishing in that final top 12 on Sunday, December 4, which would enable the Cotton Bowl to be in play. Those odds have gone up steadily over the past month with the results, with Clemson losing, Alabama losing, Ole Miss losing, the various teams in the Big 12 losing. USC's odds of the Cotton Bowl are going up. And of course, at USC, you want to be in the Rose Bowl, if not the playoff. Like those are obviously the 2 top tier goals. But like the difference between the Cotton Bowl, which is right in the middle, and Rose Bowl playoff, that's a much smaller distance than the distance between the Cotton Bowl and Alamo Holiday underneath it.
Yeah.
Like and USC fans might think that I'm settling here, but like if you told me right now USC is going to be in the Cotton Bowl as opposed to the Alamo and Holiday, but also as opposed to the Rose or the playoff, like I would take that deal. Now that's just me. I'm not speaking for USC fans. I'm just speaking for me. If USC gets that out of year 1, like that's really, really good. That's a good landing spot. But if it really losing twice and going to the Alamo or Holiday, man, that would just be a total buzzkill and just a very empty feeling from a USC perspective.
Well, and I think a couple of things that you bring up there. One, we didn't know what to expect, even with all the bells and whistles of Lincoln Riley coming. And, we joke that, half of his roster came in the transfer portal. It wasn't quite half, but it felt like it at times. You didn't know what to expect. You didn't know, you knew what to expect 2 or 3 years from now. You didn't know what to expect in year 1. And could he meld this roster together? And could he make it a cohesive team? A lot of talent. That doesn't always make it a team. It makes it a lot of talented players. Doesn't always work well in a team sport. But it's when you got as far as they did and had the kind of season they had, and yeah, they didn't have any, marquee wins. You've got the last 2 games of the season now, and you've got UCLA and you've got Notre Dame. And growing up in Southern California, the way I did, and following college football all across the country, you knew that for USC, you couldn't lose both.
Yep.
If you lost one, it hurt, but you could get over it. If you won both, it was a successful year, period. The UCLA game is more important because it's got the conference race, at stake right there. And so, and with Notre Dame is having a rebuild in the middle of a season, which you don't see often. Usually you got to wait till the off season to rebuild. There was the Marcus Freeman hysteria, after the first 2 losses and the loss to Marshall. And, golly gosh, it's a halfway decent football team right now. He's done a really good job of putting the pieces back together in the middle of the season. But so if you lose that Notre Dame game and you're USC, you're like, it kind of stings because it's the last one before you go into the postseason, and you're kind of left with that bad taste in your mouth for a few weeks until you get to your postseason game. The UCLA one, like I said, it's got conference implications in it. There's a lot riding on it for both teams, which is what makes this year's game so much better than. If you're a UCLA fan, you'll love last year's game because, man, it was, touchdown palooza, for DTR. But you also got to acknowledge that was a really, really bad USC team. I mean, they're just not a lot there, and not a lot of talent and not a lot of heart, quite frankly, from one game to the next. So you kind of, go through some of those machinations when you think about what's at stake and the win and how good is the win and the level of the win. I'm seeing a question. Can I do this, Mark? I see this question kind of addressed to me.
Coming in from LBC Trojan. Thank you so much, Rick.
All right. Let me be honest in that I don't remember the exact year. I'm going to say I know that they lost in 92 to Wisconsin. They lost again in 99 to Wisconsin. They went 3 in a row in the 80s, and I'm not going to that's why I say I'm not going to remember the exact years where they beat Iowa, Illinois, and Michigan, but it was one of those 3 as the last time they won the Rose Bowl.
Michigan 82, Iowa 80, UCLA.
Iowa was now I don't know the quarterback, but it was Iowa in 86, 85 season, the 86
season.
Okay,
yes.
All right. And that was the Eric Ball game where he went crazy. Yeah.
They beat Michigan in the 82 season with Tom Ramsey. Then they beat Illinois in 83
with Rick Neuheisel.
Yep.
And so 85 against Iowa.
And the Illinois quarterback was Jack Trudeau, who had a great season, that year as well. So yeah, it was. I knew I wouldn't, remember each one by year without a little help. But
look at this!
I was at all 3 of them.
I wouldn't have guessed this, although I remember Matt Stevens.
Sure. Because it's funny because Matt Stevens is on the UCLA broadcast team, and the sideline reporter for the UCLA broadcast team is Wayne Cook, who infamously had horrible play selection at the end of the first game, the first Rose Bowl against Wisconsin, and essentially lost the game for UCLA. But I'm sure Wayne doesn't want to revisit those days. Yeah, Matt Stevens, I remember that. They had the one with Neuheisel when he was the quarterback. There were probably like 5, 6, 7 players who had food poisoning. UCLA players who got sick like on New Year's Eve with wherever they ate. I assume in the hotel they were staying in, and got food poisoning and were horribly sick and lost. Anyway, yeah, I was at all 3 of those Rose Bowls. Matter of fact, I will mark this for posterity. I have been at every UCLA Rose Bowl game since I've been born. That includes the 1966 Rose Bowl against Michigan State when I was 2 months old.
Wow.
But my parents had tickets and didn't have anyone to watch me and brought me with them. So I was there for the upset win over Michigan State.
One of the biggest Rose Bowl upsets ever.
Absolutely.
14-12?
Yep. I was there for the 76 game over Ohio State, Archie Griffin and Cornelius Green and Ohio State
national championship.
Yep, absolutely. I was there for all the ones in the 80s, and that's right. It was Dick Vermeil, and then he left right after that to go to the NFL, and they brought in some dude named Terry Donahue, and I that worked all right. I was there for both of the losses against Wisconsin. So I've been in every one of them since I've been born. So I stamp that as part of my legacy.
It is kind of interesting that this year is the rebirth of Tennessee. It's the rebirth of UCLA. Two marquee programs that have not won conference championships this century.
Right.
Both come back in the same year after droughts of nearly a quarter of a century.
Who almost faced off in the first BCS championship game. Sorry
except
to bring up.
except for UCLA's meltdown in Miami. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's absolutely correct. Yeah, I mean, and Tennessee is having an amazing season, and Hendon Hooker, a guy that really played his way out of Virginia Tech. It really wasn't heavily recruited beyond that. I've talked to some coaches about him, and they don't say it in a negative way, I guess, but they're kind of like, yeah, we didn't have a lot of interest in him. We just kind of didn't like where his headspace was when he wanted out of Virginia Tech, and really didn't like where he's going. But man, dude found a home, right? And that offense at Tennessee is a lot of fun to watch. Their defense will cost them from time to time, but the offense is really a lot of fun to watch. And it's a rebirth for Josh Heupel, at that point as well as a head coach. And so it's a lot of fun to watch. I'm getting a kick. I know we're off the UCLA USC subject, so I apologize, but I'm getting a kick out of watching TCU. As Mark knows, I covered SMU for a year when Sonny Dykes was down there, and I like Sonny. He's a good guy, and he was always so cooperative with the media. And I don't want to take up too much of your time on this, Mark, but
You're good.
Just a funny anecdote. We've talked about the difference in coaches and how different coaches, when you're covering Lincoln Riley, what access is like, out of USC. When I was covering UCLA, we would be at practice for the 20 minutes we were allowed to physically watch practice, and they would put the offense on the farthest part away from the media, so we couldn't see much, and we'd see a lot of the special teams practice and things like that. But you could sit there on your phone and you could tweet, making up an anecdote that Zach Charbonnet is in a walking boot and not practicing with the running backs. He's working out with the trainers. Now, Chip Kelly would never tell you what was wrong with him. He would just say he's unavailable. That is a standard line. When I'm covering Wake Forest, it is very different. We're allowed to watch all of practice from beginning to end. There are no shutout periods until the season starts. Then we're not allowed to go at all. And in terms of the injured players, they have an area called the pit where they're working out with the trainers. We're not even allowed to say who's in the pit. We're not even allowed to acknowledge the pit exists. It's like all those guys are in witness protection. Can't even talk about them. But when it came to covering SMU and Sonny Dykes, he'd be like, hey, what happened to Shane Buechele? He'd be, oh man, he twisted his ankle. We got it in a bucket of ice right now. We'll see what the swelling is like. He's going to get x-rays tomorrow. We'll give you a heads up on Monday. Sonny did everything short of showing us the x-ray on Monday to talk about the injury report. And it's, as a reporter who does this professionally, I love that, man. The more you tell us, the happier I'm going to be covering the team.
Well, of course, with TCU, you have the exquisite storyline of Garrett Riley potentially locking Lincoln Riley out of the playoff. I mean,
wouldn't that be something?
Cannot make this stuff up.
Right? Wouldn't that be something? I mean,
God.
Yeah. I mean, and I just like the idea that, no offense to Alabama fans, if there's any Alabama fans watching this, I'm perfectly good with Alabama not making the playoffs this year. I am fine with it. I'm fine with Clemson not making the playoffs again. I'm
first
good
year with
it.
Alabama and Clemson both being
That's
out.
right. That's right. I hope TCU gets in there, and they will probably get their rear ends kicked by Georgia up one side and down the other. But man, it'll be fun to have somebody different in there.
Tony, I really have one other thing I'd like to get your take on. And
Yeah.
I know that you have less of a beat on this, considering what your professional beat is right now versus what it was for years and years with UCLA and being on the other coast now. But what became a bit of a joke across college football early in the season were those crowds at the Rose Bowl.
Oh, yeah.
You see on Twitter, the shots, the video, the whole deal. So as this team started to play more meaningful games, Washington, Oregon, winning against Utah at the Rose Bowl, did the UCLA fan base warm up to this team not just in terms of the numbers in the Rose Bowl, but you follow that in regards to the interest in the team. Has this team caught a little bit of everyone's fancy?
Only a little, not nearly as much as it could have been or should have been. Look, UCLA is to blame for the early small crowds. What do you expect when out of four seasons under Chip Kelly, 3 of them have been losing seasons? He started the season 6 games under 500 as a coach in his tenure at UCLA. And you open with Bowling Green, Alabama State, and South Alabama. What did you think was going to happen? Now, if you're UCLA, if you're sitting there typing away on the UCLA fan boards, what you're saying is, because I saw it and I read it and kind of was unfortunately dismissive of it, was you get all the usual stuff. Yeah, but it was 11 o'clock for the game and Pasadena and Labor Day weekend. It's like 150 degrees out. And, yeah, I agree. It is. It's miserable. Guess what? It's miserable in lots of parts of the country that time of year. And the college football stadiums are packed. Then you get it's Southern California. We've got so much other things to do. If the team's not winning, we got other options. Well, yeah, but it's the first game of the season. How do you know they're not winning? They weren't winning, but now you're coming off an 8-4 season, which you want to celebrate to some degree and acknowledge to some degree. And hey, season opener, man, you got to go, right? I think you and I've joked with you over the years that, fans in other parts of the country, when they lose, the fans get really upset. When you're a UCLA fan and you lose, you rant on social media for 15 minutes. Then you go online to see what concert is coming up at the Hollywood Bowl and if you can still get tickets. Their level of consternation has limits. It's short-lived. And then you get the students aren't in school yet because they're on the quarter system. And so it's, come on, man. The student section accounts for maybe 15% of the ticket sales on any given weekend for a UCLA game. That is not the reason the place was empty. So you saw they now tarped both, the top section of both end zones. I know that there was an announcement this afternoon. They're taking the sponsor tarps off. So in other words, the UCLA health system and the Jumpman logo are coming off both end zones in order to accommodate more ticket sales. The UCLA ones will stay. It'll increase the tickets for the game to about 70,000, which is still a good 12 to 13,000 under what it's supposed to be. Did they warm up? They warmed up a little. I think they had like 50,000 at the Arizona game, which is capacity with those tarps on was 58. So you never got to capacity once this season. Not once.
Now, Tony,
not even when the team was undefeated.
Tony, I have to butt in here. They're not taking off all the tarped areas. And so, not, is that simply fear that USC fans were going to snap up those extra tickets? I mean, that question has to be asked.
Sure. Yeah. They're fine with the 6 or 7 or 8,000 or whatever it is that USC sold for the game, and whatever USC fans get off the secondary market. It is what it is. But yeah, they don't want that entire end zone or both end zones in a sea of cardinal and gold. So yeah, they're leaving. They're taking basically 4 mini tarps off, so it'll go to 70,000, and it should be sold out. This is USC UCLA with a combined 3 losses between them, and a fight for the Pac-12 championship at stake. And excuse my language, but the damn place should be sold out without the tarps. It boggles my mind. And it's going to change. Look, it's going to change when the schools move to the Big Ten, and there's a game against Ohio State and the place is half full with Buckeye fans. they haven't. The UCLA fan base did not buy in enough. They congratulate themselves for getting to 50,000 on a Saturday night against Arizona. Whatever, you were still under capacity.
You know, George Kliavkoff at the UC Board of Regents meeting, he should demand that UCLA untarp every seat and the proceeds go to subsidizing Cal.
That is a great idea, since he's so worried about, as he called it, the flagship. As if. That's a great idea. You want to help Cal out, you can give him money from the extra ticket sales.
So I have not kept up with the whole approach to, laying the tarp to sanction off various portions of the stadium and how that's progressed through the years. That stadium sat 103,000 at its peak, something in that range.
Right, but after renovations, it went down. It's 92,000 for the Rose Bowl game, because they will sell every single seat in the stadium.
Sure.
It's about 82,000 for the UCLA games, because they will tarp off some of the lower seats where you can't see over the players on the sidelines. Yeah. They're not going to bother selling it. The Rose Bowl knows they can sell them for 175, face value, even though you can't see any of the game, and you're sitting there so low, you're watching the Jumbotron the entire time. UCLA tarps those. So for the UCLA games, it was historically 82,000. But they started tarping the one end zone last year, and then this year they tarped the upper levels, and it is just the upper levels, but nonetheless, they started the season tarping off both of them, because you knew you weren't gonna. And part of the challenge was, and I don't think it really worked well, is the camera shots look really bad when someone's kicking a field goal and the entire end zone is empty. So you put up the UCLA tarp, so there's some color and there's some whatever. Okay, that's fine. But everything below it is still empty. So I don't think it really worked the way they had hoped. It didn't take away the embarrassment of the low crowds the way they had hoped. Everybody, smacked them around for the low crowds anyway. Some of it was kind of, idiotic when, a national media person who doesn't really follow UCLA other than maybe once or twice a year would post a picture and say, hey, can you imagine what it's going to look like when they play Rutgers? Because the national media still can't get it out of their mind that the West Coast schools are not going to play Maryland and Rutgers every year. It's not a home and home, for goodness, going to Piscataway, for goodness sake. But it's, so there was a lot of that. They've tried to make it as PR friendly as possible. The announced crowd is not always the in attendance crowd. The announced crowd is ticket sales. It's not, and UCLA does a good job with promotions throughout the city, the I'm going to college promotion with local school kids and things like that. But then they also count that obviously in the attendance when they gave away 5,000 tickets to, city school kids. So it has never been this year what it should be. I think there's still a little bit of the UCLA fan base is still out on the program, still out on chip. But they should have been there, because next year you're coming back with no DTR, no Zach Charbonnet. It is a complete rebuild next year, complete, with another really not so great out of conference schedule. I mean, it would have been different if Michigan hadn't bought its way out and Michigan came here this year. And ironically, the playoff committee keeps dinging Michigan for having a week out of conference schedule. If Michigan had come out west and beaten UCLA, it would have been a little bruise on UCLA, but at least it would have been Michigan and it would have been a big crowd. Neither team benefited from Harbaugh wanting out of that game.
Folks, we appreciate you all being here for our USC show here at the Voice of College Football. We so much appreciate Tony for being here. Follow him, Tony Bruin, That's the Twitter handle. Last Word on College Football. Tony, is there anything in particular you want us to look out for this week?
We're wrapping up the season. We've got a lot of coverage, a lot of teams not living up to what had hoped for. We talk about UCLA and what their hopes were, what they had been. I'm sitting out here in Charlotte making the, hour and 15-minute drive out to Winston-Salem a couple times a week. And I got to tell you, there's a Wake Forest fan base that's stinging because 3 weeks ago they were 6-1 and feeling pretty good. Now they've lost 3 in a row and are absolutely reeling. Again, same as UCLA, with one of the most experienced teams in the country, knowing that most of it's gone next year. Here's a tease. Tomorrow, Mark, we come out, one of your favorites that works for us, Kevin McGuffey. We have his updated bowl projections.
Nice.
That will be out in the morning around 9 o'clock East Coast time. So you can check for that whenever you get up with your cup of coffee. Kevin's got a great success rate over the years, picking, and projecting each week along the way, updating as the games go along. And so you'll want to check that out tomorrow, definitely. So you can go to lastwordonsports.com and you click on the college football section, and there we are. We've got our writers still working hard, and we'll be big into our bowl coverage like we are every year as well when it comes time for that. We've got the Facebook page. We've got the Twitter feed at Last Word on CFB. And even though I moved out to Charlotte and started covering Wake Forest, I did not change my Twitter handle to Demon Deacon Tony or, Tony Wake Forest or anything like that. It's still Tony Bruin.
Absolutely. And you've got an idea how full my Rolodex is, but when it comes to UCLA football, I don't give it another thought. It's always you,
that,
Tony. So
I am still talking to my sources within the UCLA athletic department on a weekly basis. I'm still pinging people on Chip's staff, which he doesn't know about, and I'm sure he's not watching this, so I feel safe saying it. So I am still in communication every week with my UCLA people.
Awesome. Well, we thank you so much for being here, Tony.
Glad to do it. I always like hanging out with you and Matt. I always enjoy doing Matt's show. You guys are real pros, and I appreciate it.
We appreciate you.
All right, guys. Be well.
Have a great night. Enjoy the game.
All right. Take care.
Matt, if you've got a second before we sign off tonight, we can honor this super chat coming in from Eddie Chase. And Eddie, if you want more of a full discussion on this and presentation from Matt, just last week's show, you can go back just 1 week where Matt addressed this. But Alex Grinch can't come back next year. Can he? His schemes and calling are not championship caliber.
Yeah, so Eddie, we did address this on, so this is our 28th live show. So you just look for Mark Rogers go to YouTube, look for Mark Rogers USC Trojans Live 27. That will be the broadcast that really fleshes out the Alex Grinch discussion. But just to kind of give that the Cliff Notes version, he should get next year. But like if the coaching carousel spins in certain ways that an elite defensive coordinator happens to be available on the market, if you're Lincoln Riley, you owe it to yourself, to the USC fan base, to the program, to the players, to go out and grab that guy. I mean, I don't think if you're Lincoln Riley, you go out of your way to look for that guy. But if an elite defensive coordinator becomes available, you grab him, because Alex Grinch is not yet an elite defensive coordinator. But if we're just looking at the question of, do you keep him? Do you fire him? You keep him, because you knew all along that the cupboard was thin on defense this year. And Grinch, moreover, he did a great job in the first 6 games. Now, the last several games, it's all spun sideways. But and even if these last 2 games don't go great, still what he did against Oregon State, what he did against Washington State, he has overperformed through 10 games. But obviously with the last 4 games, he's not overperformed nearly as much as he did overall compared to the first 6. Like after the first 6 weeks, we were thinking Broyles Award candidate. He's in the mix for the Broyles. And now it's just, like these last few games have been pathetic, but over as a body of 10 games, he hasn't been, let's put it this way, he has not been worse than expected. I'd say he's still been slightly to moderately better than expected as a 10-game body of work. But of course, the last month has been atrocious. There's no getting around it. And so, like, we need to see adjustments here. We need to see a sign that he can, X and O his way against, especially UCLA. Like Notre Dame, with the lack of a passing game, that should be a much easier assignment comparatively. But like, if he does give up 62 to UCLA, that's Todd Orlando country. And that would be, a 5-alarm fire. There's no doubt about that. And Lincoln Riley would at least need to think about 2023 if that happens. Now, the odds of that, not high, but, it's within the realm of possibility. So, we'll see if how these next 2 games go, and that will determine how much of a question there is surrounding Alex Grinch. But I think overall, you should, the first lean, the primary inclination should be, give him 2023 because there should be more talent, should hit the transfer portal, a full recruiting cycle. We should be able to give Alex Grinch many more quality players. This was not supposed to be fully fixed and solved in 1 year. Like, no one should have had that idea. And maybe the first 6 games gave everyone the impression that, it would just continue to be a steady climb. Just the defense was good through 6 games. It would just keep getting better. Well, let's remember the opponents got better. I mean, certainly Utah, and now you have UCLA. So a little bit more of a backloaded schedule. I mean, not the Colorado pocket, but like Arizona has a legitimate offense. We saw that against UCLA. There have been some really tough offenses that USC has gone against, and then UCLA is certainly a supreme challenge purely from an offensive standpoint. He fundamentally, Alex Grinch should deserve a 2023 season, but if you can find an elite defensive coordinator without going out of your way to look for one, like if someone comes up on the marketplace, or if the UCLA game is an absolute disaster, a la Todd Orlando last year, then we can revisit the conversation. I think that's the best overall way to handle that particular question.
Wednesday at 10:30 Eastern, 7:30 Pacific time. Please join Tim, Tony, and Rick and a cast of thousands for the Pac-12 live chat show right here on the USC channel, and then USC post-game live with Tim, Tony, and Rick. Of course, they do a phenomenal job USC post-game, and then, of course, throughout the week, Matt's work. Matt, anything in particular you would like to highlight?
You know what? Really, no specific story. Like, we're just going to cover the heck out of USC UCLA week and historical remembrances from the various past decades. All the trash talk coming from the Bruins. We're just going to cover this game, and of course, next week's Notre Dame week. So you just want to make Trojans Wire, trojanswire.usatoday.com. You just want to make us your home for UCLA and Notre Dame game coverage. And if there is a Pac-12 title game, hopefully there will be. For USC, you want to follow us for coverage of that. So, I don't advertise the heck out of our website when it's Cal or Colorado, but this is now, big game week, and you definitely want to make us your regular home. You want to be stopping in every day to see what we have on these main event throwdowns involving USC. And this is how it's supposed to be at USC, right? 9-1. You enter the UCLA Notre Dame double stack with everything on the table. This is what it's supposed to look like. And now we come up against these proving ground moments. So Trojans Wire is your home for written coverage of these games. And of course, for broadcasts, if you want to be right here at the voice of college football, Tony, Tim, Rick, the Wednesday call-in show, and of course the post-game show on Saturday. I will definitely make it a point to be on that show. I give those 3 guys the first hour while I have to file my post-game stories. And then midway through, an hour, 75 minutes in, I'll hop on for the back end of that show. It'll be the same against Notre Dame, which, by the way, that's a primetime game, ABC, 7:30 Eastern, 4:30 Pacific on November 26th, Thanksgiving Saturday. So it's full go here at the Voice of College Football.
Absolutely. And then everybody right back here next Monday at 8 Pacific time with Matt and myself for the next edition of USC Live. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. And Matt is the guy that makes this all happen for 28 consecutive weeks. Thanks, Matt. Enjoy the game and a college football weekend.
Definitely looking forward to it. It's an electric big game at USC, rivalry game. This is what we live for.